Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II. Iris Chang's second book, the 1997 best-selling non-fiction The Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II, tells in depth the story of the 1937 to 1938 Nanjing Massacre, a story of mass murder and mass rape of Chinese civilians committed by soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army in Nanjing, the then capital of the Republic of China. The atrocities occurred immediately after the Battle of Nanjing during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Iris Chang's book describes the events leading up to the Nanjing Massacre and provides a graphic account of the war crimes and atrocities committed by Japanese soldiers, while equally lambasting the Japanese government for its refusal, even now, to rectify those atrocities or even acknowledge their country's part in this horrific event. Her book also criticizes the Japanese people for their ignorance about the massacre. It is one of the first books that studies the Nanjing Massacre in the English language, introducing the atrocity to readers in the Western world, and has since been translated into several languages. The book's publication renewed significant interest in Japanese wartime conduct, not only in China, but also in Korea, Southeast Asia, including the Philippines and the Pacific region. The publication of this book led to both acclaim and criticism by the public and academics. While it was praised for its showing more clearly the extent and brutality of the atrocity than any previous account, there are criticisms over the analysis conducted by Chang as to motivational bias and the total numbers killed and subsequently raped due to her lack of training as a historian. Through Iris Chang's extensive research for this book, she is credited with finding the diaries of both John Rape and Minnie Vautrin, both of whom played major roles in the Nanking Safety Zone, a designated area within Nanjing that protected Chinese civilians during the massacre. Background and inspiration. As a child growing up in the USA, Iris Chang was told stories by her parents about the Nanjing Massacre. Her parents had escaped from Nanjing via Taiwan to the United States after World War II. In the book's introduction, Chang had written that throughout her childhood, the Nanjing Massacre had remained buried in the back of her mind as a metaphor for unspeakable evil. Later, when she searched local public libraries and found nothing, she wondered why no one had written a book about it. Almost two decades later, the topic entered her life again when she learned that producers had completed a documentary about the massacre. One of the producers, Xiao Tzu-ping, used footage of the massacre itself, shot by missionary John McGee. The other producer was Nancy Tong, who together with Christine Choi produced and co-directed In the Name of the Emperor, a film containing interviews with Chinese, American and Japanese civilians. Iris Chang, upon talking with Xiao and Tong, soon found herself connected to a network of people who felt the need to further document and publicize the Nanjing Massacre. While attending a conference on the Nanjing Massacre held in Cupertino, California in December 1994, Chang was inspired enough to begin writing the future introduction to her book. While attending the conference, including, I was suddenly in a panic that this terrifying disrespect for death and dying, this reversion in human social evolution would be reduced to a footnote of history, treated like a harmless glitch in a computer program that might or might not again cause a problem unless someone forced the world to remember it. Research. Iris Chang spent the next 2 years on researching for the book. She found source material in the US that included diaries, films and photographs of missionaries and military officers who were stationed in Nanjing at the time of the massacre. Her extensive level of research included traveling to the city to interview survivors of the Nanjing Massacre and to read accounts written in Chinese, as well as confessions by Japanese Army veterans. She incorporated the most recent work on the topic by both Chinese and Chinese-American historians, including several disturbing photographs and a myriad of translated documents. The diaries. The research conducted by Iris Chang led her to make what one San Francisco Chronicle article called significant discoveries on the topic of the Nanjing Massacre. These discoveries were in the form of diaries of two Westerners who were in Nanjing leading efforts to save lives during the invasion by the Japanese. The diaries documented the events of the Nanjing Massacre from the perspectives of their writers and provided detailed accounts of the atrocities that they were a witness to, in addition to information surrounding the circumstances of the Nanjing safety zone. The first diary was that of John Rape, a German member of the Nazi Party who was the leader of the Nanjing safety zone, a demilitarized zone within the city that Rape and other Westerners had set up with the aim of providing a level of protection for Chinese civilians. John Rape's diary is over 800 pages in length and contains one of the most detailed accounts of the Nanjing Massacre. Translated into English, it was published in 1998 by Random House as The Good Man of Nanking, The Diaries of John Rape. The second diary was written by Minnie Vautrin, an American missionary who saved the lives of an estimated 10,000 women and children when she provided them with shelter at Jinling College. Vautrin's diary recounted her personal experiences and feelings on the Nanjing Massacre. In her diary, an entry reads, "There probably is no crime that has not been committed in the city today." Her diary was used as source material by Hua-Ling Hu for a biography of Vautrin and her role during the Nanjing Massacre entitled American Goddess at the Rape of Nanking, The Courage of Minnie Vautrin. In her book, Iris Chang dubbed John Rape as the Oscar Schindler of Nanking and Minnie Vautrin as the Anne Frank of Nanjing. Contents. The book is structured into three main parts. The first, using a technique of narration of the key events from three different perspectives, that of the Japanese military, the Chinese victims, and the Westerners that assisted the Chinese civilians. The second part of the book looks at the post-war reaction to the massacre, especially from the point of view of the American and European governments, while the third part examines the circumstances that kept the knowledge of the massacre hidden from the public consciousness for decades after the war. Atrocities. The killings, torture, and other atrocities that were inflicted, particularly upon the female population, are depicted in detail. The types of torture listed included barbaric methods such as live burials, mutilation, death by fire, death by ice, and death by dogs. The testimony of a survivor of the massacre described what can only be called a killing contest amongst the Japanese soldiers as to who could kill the fastest. Sexual assaults amounted to the greatest mass rape in world history, and an estimated number of women that were subjected to this horror were listed as somewhere between 20,000 and 80,000, including Buddhist nuns. Those subjected to this horror were from the very young to the very old, even those pregnant at that time. Not all those that were raped were female. Some Chinese men were also victim to this assault, with family members forced to commit acts of degradation, including fathers and daughters, brother and sister, and sons on their mothers. Death toll. The estimates of the numbers that were killed in the atrocity vary greatly, and the actual figure will never be known. Chinese military specialist Liu Fang proposed a figure of 430,000, while officials at the Nanjing Massacre Memorial Hall state that at least 300,000 were killed. Judges from the International Military Tribunal for the Far East listed the number of dead as 260,000, while Japanese historian Akira Fujiwara mentioned that at least 200,000 died in the massacre. Estimates at the lower end of the scale, including those by John Rape, who never conducted a systematic count, an estimated figure of somewhere between 50 and 60,000, while Japanese historian Ikehito Hata argued that the true figure was somewhere between 38,000 and 42,000. Research into work of Sun Zaihui of the Jiangsu Academy of Social Sciences is listed in the book. In Sun's 1990 paper, The Nanking Massacre and the Nanking Population, he estimates the total killed was 377,400 using Chinese burial records available at the time. His figures include estimates given by Japanese Imperial Army Major Ohaya Hisao, whose confessional report about the bodies disposed totaled 377,400. Iris Chang's research showed there was compelling evidence that the Japanese themselves believed the death toll was as high as 300,000. Chang cited a message the Japanese Foreign Minister Koki Hirota relayed to his contacts in Washington, D.C. on January 17, 1938. The content of the message acknowledged that not less than 300,000 Chinese civilians were slaughtered, many in cold blood. Acclaim for the book. The Rape of Nanking sold more than half a million copies when it was first published in the USA, and according to the New York Times, the book received general critical acclaim. The book remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 10 weeks and sold more than 125,000 copies in just 4 months. Several leading historians said they believe that Iris Chang's revelation of Japanese wartime crimes and the country's post-war attempts to cover up and distort history will help raise public awareness of the incident. The success of the book made Iris Chang an instant celebrity in the USA, and she was awarded honorary degrees, invited to give lectures, and to discuss the Nanjing Massacre on shows across the US. She was invited to the White House by Hillary Clinton and was later described as the best young historian the USA has got. Iris Chang was named the National Woman of the Year by the Organization of Chinese Americans, and over the next 18 months, Iris Chang was invited to 65 cities on her book tour. Great praise was received from the news media, with the Wall Street Journal claiming that it was the first comprehensive examination of the destruction of this Chinese imperial city, and that Chang had skillfully excavated from oblivion the terrible events that took place. The Atlantic Monthly described the book as a crushing indictment of the Japanese Army's behavior, while the Chicago Tribune called it a powerful new work of history and moral inquiry, further stating that Chang takes great care to establish an accurate accounting of the dimensions of the violence. Perhaps the words of the Philadelphia Inquirer were poignant, as that when they wrote, it was a compelling account of a horrendous episode that, until recently, has been largely forgotten. There were several other favourable testimonies, including from Harvard, the Fairbanks Center for East Asian Research, Yale, and the University of California, with Frederick Wakeman writing that the book was heartbreaking, an utterly compelling book. The descriptions of the atrocities raised fundamental questions not only about Imperial Japanese militarism, but the psychology of the torturers, rapists, and murderers. Criticism of the book. There was also a sizable number of people critical of the content of the book, with critics claiming Iris Chang made an inappropriate and facile association between mass murder and Japanese culture, and that her book contained incorrect historical dates and names due to her lack of training as a historian. Critics also alleged that Chang allowed her personal feelings to be evident in the book, that it lacked intellectual rigor, and that certain passages in the book were plagiarized. That Iris Chang had placed an undue amount of attention on the actions of right-wing Japanese politicians and groups who refused to acknowledge Japanese war crime, while ignoring the contributions made by Japanese historians who were preserving the memory of the massacre. Sonny Efron of the Los Angeles Times led with the opinion that the bitter row over the book may leave Westerners with a misimpression that little has been written in Japan about the Nanjing Massacre, when in fact the National Library holds at least 42 books about the massacre. I think one of the main reasons for Iris Chang beginning to research the topic was because there was so little information about the massacre written in English and available in the USA. Sonny Efron continued with criticism of Iris Chang, claiming that after years of government-enforced denial, Japanese middle schools now carry accounts of the massacre in their textbooks. Further, Efron stated that Japanese liberals alleged there were mistakes in Chang's book that could undermine their endeavours to pressure the Japanese government into apologising and atoning for the massacre. There was further criticism from Charles Buress, a staff writer at the San Francisco Chronicle, that questioned a secret telegram sent by Japan's foreign minister in 1938, claiming it was incorrectly cited as compelling evidence that Japanese soldiers killed at least 300,000 Chinese civilians in Nanjing. According to Buress, the figure of 300,000 killed came from a message sent by a British reporter and calculated the number of deaths in Nanjing and elsewhere in its total. Additionally, Buress questioned Chang's motivation for writing the book and whether she was an activist or historian, and that the book draws on her emotional impetus and from her conviction to not let the Nanjing Massacre be forgotten by the world. Buress cited a Japanese history professor, Ikehiko Nahata, who alleged that 11 photos in the book were misrepresented or fake. One of those photos showed women and children walking across a bridge with Japanese soldiers and was captioned as, "The Japanese rounded up thousands of women. Most were gang raped or forced into military prostitution." Hatta claimed this photo originally appeared in a 1937 Japanese newspaper that showed the peaceful scenes of Chinese villages under Japanese occupation. It was further alleged that since Iris Chang did not conduct any of her research in Japan, she incorrectly portrayed Japan's post-war attitudes towards the atrocity. In response to these allegations from Buress criticism, Iris Chang wrote to the San Francisco Chronicle, but the letter was not printed in their publication. In her letter, she offered criticism of her own relating to Buress's article. Iris Chang further stated that Hatta is considered an untrustworthy scholar, even in Japan, because of his contributions to ultra-right-wing Japanese publications, one of which, Bungai Shunai, supports Holocaust denial, and in another article, it accused Chang of being part of a conspiracy plot involving the Chinese Communist Party, the MacArthur Foundation, and Rupert Murdoch. In response to the allegations of the photos being misrepresented, Iris Chang wrote that Hatta provided insufficient evidence to support his suggestion that the photos proved a peaceful Japanese occupation. In response to the photo of women and children crossing a bridge, she wrote, "The Japanese, like the Nazis, relied on deception to make mass executions and mass rapes more manageable. The hapless Chinese men, women and children rounded up by the Japanese were usually kept ignorant of their fate until it was too late to escape. In Nanking, women were guided to marketplaces to buy food, only to find platoons of soldiers waiting for them. Men were assured of food, shelter and safety by Japanese soldiers, only to be lured to remote areas and used for bayonet practice or decapitation contests." Iris Chang further stated that her book dealt with the horror of the Japanese invasion of China, and that the caption reading, "The Japanese rounded up thousands of women, most were gang raped or forced into military prostitution." The caption contained two statements of undisputable fact. Further To Buress's argument that Chang incorrectly cited a telegram sent by the Japanese foreign minister, she wrote that while the original figure of 300,000 Chinese civilian deaths in Nanjing was reported by a British reporter, this figure was cited in a message the Japanese foreign minister sent to his contacts in Washington, D.C. Chang further argued that the figure of 300,000 used by a high-ranking Japanese government official was evidence enough that the Japanese government recognized 300,000 as the number of Chinese civilian deaths. In her final criticism of Buress, Iris Chang criticized him for his nitpicking of minor details in order to draw attention away from the scope and magnitude of the Nanjing Massacre, writing that this was a common tactic among Holocaust deniers. In an interview, Iris Chang further challenged her critics by stating, "If the Japanese Foreign Ministry and the rest of the Japanese government truly care about historical truth, then they should open all their wartime archives to the rest of the world. They shouldn't mind inviting an international task force of historians from the US, China, Japan, Korea, and other countries to review all the high-level Japanese records from that era and publish them for general and scholarly consumptions. Trust me, if the newly released archival records disprove any of the facts in my book, I will be the first person to acknowledge this in the next edition of the Rape of Nanking. Moreover, I would help the Japanese government publicize the new facts to the world media and find prestigious publishers in the US to translate the documents into English." Reaction in Japan. Iris Chang's book, The Rape of Nanking, has caused controversy in Japan. In 1999, Fujiwara said that a campaign to deny the Nanking Massacre itself by presenting the weaknesses of Iris Chang's book is being developed. The massacre denial groups have been using these kind of tactics to maintain there was no massacre by presenting the contradictions in testimony quoted or by the use of inappropriate photos. Yet it is impossible to deny the occurrence of the incident itself because of these few mistakes. It is an illogical jump in reasoning to deny that the Nanjing Massacre ever happened by attacking her book. Ritsumeikan, Asia Pacific University's Associate Professor David Askew said that Chang's book ignited an interest in Japan about the massacre, increasing the number of publications about the massacre in Japan. He offered the opinion that a unified Japanese view of the massacre didn't exist because of the internal debates and contentions surrounding the massacre, and that the different views can be categorized into mutually exclusive thought groups. He further alleged that some aspects of her book undermine the argument put forth by the Great Massacre School of Thought, which advocates for the validity of the findings at the Tokyo trials and concludes that there were at least 200,000 casualties and at least 20,000 rape cases, and is considered to be the most sophisticated and credible thought group in Japan. In an attempt to prevent her Japanese publisher from releasing a Japanese translation of her book, right-wing Japanese groups threatened and pilloried Iris Chang, her publisher, and Japanese historians. A Japanese literary agency informed Iris Chang that several Japanese historians declined to review the translation, with one professor backing out due to pressure placed on his family from an unknown organization, and Chang's publisher said he was risking his life by publishing her book. According to Japanese scholar Ivan P. Hall, revisionist historians in Japan organized a committee of right-wing scholars to condemn the book, with repeated appearances at the Foreign Correspondence Club in Tokyo and throughout Japan. Iris Chang's Japanese publisher requested edits to the book to satisfy right-wing Japanese scholars, including the deletion of photographs, altering maps, and publishing a rebuttal to her book. According to correspondence by email between Iris Chang and Sonny Efron of the Los Angeles Times, Chang defended the veracity of her research. She said she corrected 10 errors that included incorrect dates and the misspelling of some names. However, she rejected the publisher's attempts to alter 65 other attempts in the book, as these suggested changes were additional details, interpretations, or assertions by right-wing critics for which no evidence was provided. Iris Chang wrote, "I can assure you that virtually none of these errors had anything to do with a historical description of the Nanking Massacre itself." Since the editorial requests were against the publishing contract between Iris Chang and her publisher, Chang decided to withdraw the Japanese publication of her book, while criticizing her publisher for capitulating to right-wing threats. A Japanese translation of the book was not published or circulated in Japan until December 2007, some 3 years after the death of the writer. Conclusion and Iris Chang's death. After the publication of her book, Iris Chang began receiving hate mail, primarily from Japanese ultranationalists. Threatening notes were left on her car, and Chang also believed her phone was tapped. The mother of Iris Chang said the book made Iris sad, and Iris began to suffer from bouts of depression. Iris Chang began taking medications for her mental health in August 2004. Iris Chang took her own life on the 9th of November 2004, with a memorial service held by the Nanjing Massacre survivors that coincided with her funeral in Los Altos, California, a few days later. A wing dedicated to the memory of Iris Chang was added to the Memorial Hall of the victims of the Nanjing Massacre in 2005. In the US, a Chinese garden in Norfolk, Virginia, which contains a memorial to Minnie Vautrin, added a memorial to Iris Chang, included her as the latest victim of the Nanjing Massacre, and drew parallels between the two women, as Vautrin also chose to take her own life a year after returning to the US in 1940. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting a period of 20th century Chinese history through the writing of Iris Chang. If you've enjoyed watching and has shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.